Welcome to Waiting on the Trade, a monthly comics book club for people who can't keep up with monthly comics. I'm Matt Ledger.
I'm Patrick Fitzgerald Fleck.
And I'm Suzanne Payne.
This month, we're talking about Fables, Legends in Exile, the first volume of the long-running Vertigo series by Bill Willingham, Lan Medina, and a whole host of other storybook characters. Now, in case you need a refresher, Fables Volume 1 is a whodunit, asking the question of who killed Snow White's sister, Rose Red. But it's also an introduction to the titular Fables, a cast of familiar refugees trying to make it in the strange modern world of New York City. Guys, I'm doing a fist pump right now because I said the word titular correctly on the first try.
How else would you say it?
Wrong. Wrongly.
All right.
Titular. Titular?
Titular.
Anyways.
Of course.
Suzanne, you got up at 6 in the morning the past 2 days. How you doing?
I'm a little tired and I'm a little loopy because I spent a lot of time in cars recently. We were up in Big Bay State Park and it stormed because that's what happens when we go camping.
Don't take it personal.
Did you guys get any hail? I forgot to ask you if you got any hail.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's good. It sounded like it hailed here for a little bit.
Oh, okay. But it was heavy rain, like the video game.
Yeah.
I was literally over here willing myself not to reference the video game because I was like, no one will get that. I'll be the only one who gets
Jason. Jason.
I was about to do it before Pat did.
Good game.
Yeah. And the other state park we were at was Flambeau River State Park. Between the two, go to Big Bay. Even though it stormed, much better experience.
Sweet. So, okay, no, we're doing backward first. Susie, how did you get into Fables?
Okay, so it started with, for one of my birthdays, Simon bought me actually one of the offshoots. He bought me Fairest, and he bought me the first volume of Fairest because it has like this giant pink pump on the cover, and it's focused around a princess who's like a spy, and he was just like, oh, princess. There we go. And obviously I ended up liking it. So then I started collecting the trade backs like a little bit at a time. I think I bought like 2 or 3 at a time until I had every single one of them. And
yeah, that's usually how it goes. Is either like, I guess, was it already finished by the time you started buying the trade paperbacks? Okay, I didn't think so, because it didn't finish till like 2015.
I think they were at like number 13 was available, I think, when I started getting them. So number 13 is the Great Fables crossover, so I could get from like 1 to 13.
Okay.
And I got those
roughly as far as it was when I started reading it, actually, too.
Yeah, so that was like 2010.
Did you guys say how many volumes there are now?
There's 22.
22, okay.
Yeah, it's a long guy.
And then if you go through, there's like 3 or 4 spin-offs.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Oh, that's not including the spin-offs?
Yeah, it's not including the spin-offs, because there's Fairest. Oh, I'm actually on the Wikipedia. So there's 1001 Nights of Snowfall, which I own that one. Cinderella, which is all about her being like a cool...
I was going to say, I remember that Cinderella miniseries being pretty good, actually.
Yeah. Fables, The Last Castle, which is just a one-off. Fables, Werewolves of the Heartland.
I know, Jack of Fables had his own series for a bit, too.
And then they also did some of the Wolf Among Us stuff. Hereafter, Peter and Max, The Literals. Fables is the one I'm most aware of. And the one Simon got me was Fairest in All the Land. But when I'm looking at this, Fairest in All the Land came out in 2013, but I thought I got into it sooner than that. But maybe I'm remembering incorrectly.
Time has no meaning anymore, so it's fine.
That's true, actually.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's a ton of different things that came out of it. And it also seems like when I talk to my friend Emily, that some of the main ideas that came from Fables were stolen and used in Once Upon a Time.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a whole
100%.
deal,
Yeah.
actually, which maybe we can get into, but we should probably talk about the actual book first.
Yeah, my only background for this is I played The Wolf Among Us, the Telltale game.
I have that too.
Yeah, which I guess is a prequel. It takes place
Yes.
before this volume.
Oh, I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah.
I thought it
Yeah.
was like somewhere in the middle of the story or something.
No, I
No,
guess it's prequel.
Yeah, it's like how Bigby kind of becomes
Becomes a detective.
detective. Yeah, how he's kind of put together as it. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's a really good game. I like it a lot.
No, like the little bit of it that I was trying to play was really cool because it's like you're inside the comics themselves. So it's
Yeah.
all the same style that you have in this, and it's fun. You get to be Bigby, and he's just awesome.
He's pretty awesome. Yeah, Matt, I think you and Kat would enjoy playing through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually been a while since we jointly played one of those Telltale choose your own adventure games. And we should probably do that because it is always super fun to play that with your significant other and disagree vehemently about what you should do.
But you don't really have to worry because it's a Telltale game, and whenever they say this character will remember that means
They
nothing.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, roughly. But
Majority of your choices have no bearing on how the story is actually
but
going to
some of them do.
Maybe?
And you never know when it could be the one or two that actually matter.
But anyway, yeah, it's great. It's good. How about you, Matt? What's your understanding of the Fable verse?
So like I'd first read it probably, like I said, around the same time Susie did, like in 2012-ish, when I was living in Door County in Wisconsin, because the Sturgeon Bay Library had like the full collection of it up to that point, I believe. And so that was when I was starting to really get into like, oh, I'm just going to check comics out of libraries, especially if it's something that I've heard good things about and like want to check out. Wizard Magazine used to be super big into Fables back in the day, which like Wizard Magazine is this comic that used to be about, or this magazine that used to be about comics basically. And so they'd like follow the popular storylines and artists and writers and all that sort of thing and basically be like a gossip magazine, but for comics, which was really cool. Actually, it's kind of rad. But they definitely have like an attitude. Like it's very much was a 90s boys club, and it felt like it. So I think I had written in my notes like they were really into Pinocchio and the fact that like, oh, of course he's a boy and he's stuck that way. Of course he'd want to like have sex and be really frustrated. And like rereading that bit here, I was like, that's a little like it's interesting, but it's kind of try hard.
You can really
right?
tell the story was written by a guy.
Yeah, right. So like stuff like that. But like one of the things I distinctly remember is like as the series was approaching revealing who the major bad guy, the adversary is, they had like one of those articles where they were trying to like guess who it is basically and like lay odds on who it is. I don't think they were right. I don't think they got it right. But
No.
Well, I have my suspicions. So.
It was really interesting, like now knowing who the adversary is and who doesn't make it through to the end, because sometimes it's Game of Thrones level. You're like, what that just happened? Because I remember like those specific memories came back to me. Like if I just saw the person in an image in this one, I'm like, oh no, that's right, that happens.
Yeah, there were specific characters where I saw them and I was like, oh, that's coming up for that person, that's gonna be cool, which was fun. But like as a just kind of like a warning, or I guess like a tag for this podcast, like we're not going to spoil who the adversary is. I think we're going to try to actually
I'm going to guess it. So
well, I mean, Pat's going to guess it, but he doesn't actually know because he hasn't read that far.
It's true.
And like we're going to try, I think we'll try our hardest not to spoil stuff in the later volumes, which is a thing that we don't always do. But with this one, I think so much of it is really
have we spoiled later volumes of stuff?
I don't know if we have actually. Like it's a question I don't think we've had come up very often, honestly. Like
we've spoiled the volume that we're talking about, but
yes, but like let me go to the YouTube channel quick because now I'm gonna look and see
any angry comments like, oh, I ruined.
We have a facepalm emoji on the Ghost Rider one, which I just found today. I don't really know why. I wish I knew why.
I also think that this is probably one of the ones that you guys have done that has so many volumes that aren't like full in the mainstream, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about like if you guys have done like a Batman one or like any of the more popular, like well-known, they have movies made about them, people already
Mhm.
kind of know. But like even though I would say Fables was probably like popular, obviously, it's not like
It's more
a
niche.
yeah. And I mean like you have to kind of like fairy tales
Sure.
and like the fact that your fairy tales are being seen in like I think I put that it's like the grown-up badass way. Um and that like you can't let what you already know about those fairy tales influence what you think is going to happen.
Well, I think you kind of have to actually like let what you know about those fairy tales influence what you think is going to happen, because like
In some of
that's
them.
well, like that's the whole joke, kind of, right? Is like, oh, it's this except slightly off in this way you hadn't quite thought about. Like, I
Yeah,
actually
like
really dig the Prince Charming take in this. Like, he's an insufferable asshole, but
he's actually all the Prince Charmings.
yeah, that's actually
He's
pretty cool.
he's the only one he's not is Beast because Beast is a separate person, but like they talk about how, you know, he's Snow White's his first wife. Briar Rose is his second wife, so Sleeping Beauty is his second wife. Cinderella is his third wife. So it's the same guy from all the stories, just like Bigby is the big bad wolf from both the Three Little Pigs and Red Riding Hood. So like there's
I
all
think Jack
this
is also Jack and the Beanstalk, and then
yeah,
Jack and Jill, and Jack jumping over
He's
candlestick.
so many Jacks.
he's all the Jacks. Like
Yeah,
he's literally I think they call him like Jack of all trades sometimes.
yeah,
Like
which
they
is also him. Yeah,
yeah, they it's so interesting to see how some of these go together and then like as like especially in Bigby's story and you get to know more about Bigby, like the big bad wolf isn't just a wolf. There's so much that's in his backstory about who he actually is. That's just amazing to see too.
that brings up. See, I can appreciate that this is a starting point for obviously a very large, expansive universe that's built out from here. But from this story, I had the question of do you feel like these characters are following their characters from fairy tales?
No,
Like,
I mean, they're not entirely supposed to be, I think, is again like part of the joke.
this is supposed to be like the break. Like Snow White is this badass bureaucrat and she's not going to let anyone walk over her. Whereas what we know of Snow White, she's like, don't hurt me. And you have like Beauty and the Beast, who are supposed to be this great love story that like she saw past his beastly appearance and then she found her prince and they're like on the verge of divorce the entire time. Like it's supposed to pull it off for you and you're supposed to be like, "Oh, that's it's not a kids comic."
no, sure. And then they're certainly laying into that.
Mhm.
How many times do you think characters swear in this book?
Oh, so much. There's some volumes that have like full on nudity, like just at you.
See, I don't like. So I guess the reason I kind of asked that is like part of rereading. So one of the questions we usually ask is like, if you're rereading it, what thoughts did you have upon rereading it, right? And it felt like it was trying a bit hard in some of those places
Yes.
where I'm trying to, oh yeah, there's a panel, it's near the end, and Snow White, who again like is a big tough bureaucrat and really cool actually, like drops an F-bomb and Bigby just basically says, "When did you start swearing so much?" And it's like, don't call attention to it. Like, just
They do it
you
multiple times. It's like they do it once or twice earlier too.
look how adult
Yeah.
and grown up
I
we
think,
are. It's like,
yeah, the prince I think brings it up. It's like, oh, you're swearing a bunch. I don't know. I think they went a little too far with Snow White. Like, I didn't
really,
like her.
really.
I would say in this volume, she's probably the most unlikable in this one.
Sure.
But as you continue in her growth continues and her relationships change, she becomes like awesome.
I get that she's a bureaucrat. She's trying to like run Fabletown, but like the way she treats people, like she helps Prince Charming raffle off his lands and titles in the homeland, which is actually worth nothing, and then she mocks these people and calls them idiots for doing it.
Well, that was all a ruse. Like
Oh no, I
Bigby.
think she believes that.
No, but like with the selling his title, like specifically, they were trying to make it so that, like, at least that's how I took it. Like, because Bigby asked her to do it. Like, she's originally going to tell him, no, I'm not going to do that because that's stupid. Why make someone pay for something they can't have? And Bigby's like, hey, help him do this. And so I think that they actually kind of got it rigged so that Jack was the person who won it, so that when it came to resolve it, they could resolve it the way they did.
That's an interesting take. I just figured maybe like Jack's superpower kicked in essentially. Like,
Yeah, he does have like an ability to kind of just be able to do that. But then when you think about it that way, like it makes sense because think about how nicely everything was tied up at the end.
yeah, no, that does make sense. Even if just Big B was kind of counting on like Jack would win overall, like you don't even have to fix it at that point, right?
No, if you just know Jack's things, like you knew that he would use everything he had to put as many raffle tickets in as he could because that's what he would want. So
He didn't,
it's
though. He only bought one. I mean,
yeah,
I
but
don't know. Is there a scene that I missed that Bigby and Snow White talk about signing them up? Because I don't remember that.
yeah, there's at one point where
Maybe.
Bigby like specifically says to her, I think you should. It's like before he asks her to be his date.
I don't think that her and Bigby should get together, but good lord, does she shut that down real quick?
Oh, you don't even know, Pat. You don't even know.
No spoilers, Suzanne. I actually really enjoy the awkwardness of that last page of the book. Like,
Oh, really?
it's super awkward. Yeah. I don't know. It felt honest to me.
It felt like a weird place to end.
It did feel like a weird place to end. I'll give you that.
I think though that when they were originally like putting out the single issues, because I also own some of the single issues, that they were putting them out fairly close together with each other too. So it's like even though they stopped this arc here, like the next arc starts up pretty quickly after this.
Oh yeah, I mean it was a monthly series, so you would have been buying Fables number 6 next
Yeah.
month. But it is like, it's a conclusion, but it's not really a cliffhanger in a way that a lot of the other
No.
issues are cliffhangers. So I get what you're like. It is kind of a weird place to end the volume, but I also kind of like really dug it because I don't know, it just felt awkward in a real way.
I guess I would have preferred if she made fun of him, and that's how it ended. And then she like turns cold and says, "No, really, don't even touch me. Stay over there." It's like, well, oh, okay. And that's how we will end the scene. What?
I think it's also to like show how she's like been like she has a real mistrust of relationships because
For
like
sure, but I don't know.
I mean there's the whole thing with her issues with Rose, her whole issue with Prince Charming. There's also issues with the dwarves because if you remember earlier in there they're like don't ever talk about the dwarves.
Right.
So I think that's a little bit more, but obviously if you don't know a lot about her and where her story eventually goes.
Sure. But I don't because I only read this.
That's
No.
true. So like I guess
The only thing that has me wanting to read more of this at this point is the world. The story didn't do much for me. The characters all seemed rather bland, like edgy bland, but bland. The only thing I really care about is like, okay, this is a cool premise, and I sort of want to see where it goes.
I would take this as like a first season of a TV show.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, and I got like the first 2 or 3 trades at the same time.
Mhm.
So like I finished this one and I had already seen where the world was going to go because I started in Fairest.
Right.
So then I just like was like, oh my gosh, I gotta know about this adversary stuff and everything. Yeah.
I think it is kind of designed that way too, Pat, in that it's a very like neat plot that's like good for these 5 issues, but it also gives you hints of where everyone else is, right?
And gives you like characters that you're aware of to like see like, oh, you have Bluebeard here. Is Bluebeard really this reformed guy, or is he not reformed anymore? Like,
Sure.
is Bigby reformed and you have like the pig who keeps coming back into town when he's not supposed to, and you're like, what's gonna happen with the pig?
Who's also in the game, by the way.
Yeah, well, and then if you just look at the cover of the trade, there's all these different characters that you see, and there's so many different characters that they allude to that you're like, well, how's that character going to become? It's like when they're giving that little background, and they talk about how like the Emerald City fell first, but it was so far away that no one really cared about it, and then that the Great Lion fell next, but everyone felt he was holier than thou anyway, and I'm like, ha ha ha, Narnia.
I mean, and also true, right? Like Aslan,
Yeah.
not really sad about it.
Wow.
I mean, it's sad that Liam Neeson's voice will not inhabit this lion any
Oh,
longer.
I never saw those movies.
Work at a Catholic school.
I went to a Catholic school. Yeah, Pat, I guess like what threads would carry you forward into the second volume if you were going to read it? Like what was the most interesting stuff to you?
Well, like I say, the premise of these fables living in our world is interesting, and they didn't fully explore it to my satisfaction. So I would keep reading to find out more.
Well, my friend, there are 145 issues more of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Lord.
Say the next one is called Animal Farm, and it's all about the farm.
Yeah. So, like, again, I think it benefits me to having played the game, just like it benefited Susie to having read, I don't know, the middle of the run of volumes to know.
Yeah,
that
and
there's
like
more.
I also didn't come at it cold even the first time either because I had all those Wizard magazine articles in the back of my brain.
Yeah.
Because like, if I read this and only this and there was nothing else, like I don't know if I would pick up the next volume.
I mean, I asked the questions because I actually mostly agree with you. I feel like everyone's very archetypical. Sure, let's say that. And like in a way that makes sense because they're fairy tale characters, right? But at the same time, it does feel like a coat of paint and a coat of paint and some swear words and away you go, right?
Well, they're fairy tale characters, but like they show Cinderella for a scene. She's fencing with Bluebeard.
She's a spy.
I don't know that. They don't say
Pat
that
doesn't
she's
know
a spy. Also, spoilers.
It's a whole thing.
But I don't know that, Susie. And like her characterization, oh, it's another princess who's a badass, like Snow White, who's a badass. And then there's Beauty, who won't stick up with her, like she won't put up with her layabout husband anymore because it's been thousands of years. And it's just like, good Lord, they're all samey.
It made me laugh.
If you were coming at this fresh, I wish one of us hadn't known anything about Fables going in, and I'd like to see what they thought of it and if they would be interested enough to dive into the many other volumes or media of this story.
Yeah, so like I was kind of surprised like how cold I was to it, kind of in the same way you're talking about, because it was very popular in its day, like popular enough to last 150 issues, at least 75 of which people agree are good.
But if you were to ask around, would the majority say, yeah, volume 1's a bit of a grind?
Probably.
I don't know, actually. Like, I'm not sure if even that's true. But, like, I wonder also if it's because we have seen this sort of concept done a lot more, I think, since Fables originally came out.
Right.
Like,
yeah, and when it started, it was like no one had done it before, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I was putting my notes together, and I came across, like, a joint review by some people who hadn't read it, and they were reading it because they were reading, I think, fairy tale adjacent stuff. And they really dug it. Like they thought it was fresh and new. And I was like, I just don't. And maybe that's on me. Maybe it's because I read it already and now ABC's done Once Upon a Time for however many seasons it's done. And maybe like the concept is just played out.
Well,
Maybe.
the concept, like I say, is great. It's the mystery fell flat. Like the big conclusion was meh to me. Like, oh, Rose Red faked death to not have to marry Bluebeard. Okay.
Oh, see, the mystery to me was actually kind of engaging, and like I really like that it actually makes sense, especially given the last comic we read where the mystery does not make sense.
I mean, I really appreciate that. Like, I made note that the fact that the scenes of Bigby investigating the crime scene are literally the same panels they show you when he's explaining, like, she didn't destroy her sound system, she didn't use her good CDs, the lamp didn't break. It's the same, like, oh look, they did show you that those things.
Yeah, like the comic plays really fair with you, right? Like if you were actually following along, and I think so. I'm not sure if when I read it the first time, I actually solved it like before or at the same time as Bigby or not, but I feel like I did because the comic actually gives you the clues you need and like even positions them in a way that's really fair. And so like if you're reading it, you can solve the mystery in the same amount of time that Bigby does, I think.
Yeah, I guess my problem is that we're dealing with such fantastical characters, but the mystery is such average any day like, I don't know, like there isn't any magic there. They didn't go to a witch. There's wizards, there aren't demons. It's trying to cheat a man out of his money.
I mean, that's part of the conceit, right? And also so many fairy tales are about trying to cheat a man out of his money.
I know, but there's like curses involved.
I mean, eventually curses come into play. I think I'm going to reread the series now.
Oh, there you go.
It is super tough to talk about this one in like by itself, like as one contained unit.
Because the more interesting stuff is later on.
I mean, partially, but also just because. So I was looking at the YouTube channel, right? Because I was trying to think, like, is for some reason, like, spoiling this one to me feels very wrong. Whereas any of the other podcasts we've done so far, I haven't really like thought about the fact that we may or may not spoil what's coming up in the book. And part of it is that a lot of the stuff we've read is more self-contained than this. Whereas this again is going to run for, what did we say, 17 volumes, something like that?
22. Mm-hmm.
So like there's just a lot more of this book and a lot more happens, but I feel like it is such network soap opera drama that like a lot of what the book is rests on the plot turns and the dramatics and the reveals and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like if we did spoil that stuff in this conversation, you would lose part of reading this series specifically. Yeah, right? Like
I guess we sort of spoiled the death of Nancy Drew. Just thinking back in the last episode.
We did a little bit actually, yeah. But I think we did put a spoiler warning in front of that one. But like this one specifically, there's a bunch of stuff that if you and I were just talking about it, Pat, or if like you and me and Suzanne were just talking about it, like I would tell you, oh, this is going to happen, and oh, this is going to happen, and oh, this is who the adversary. Like I would probably tell you that stuff because it's actually sort of interesting and it might drag you back into volume 2.
Yeah, it's interesting how everything comes together. Like really no one is who you think they are. I'll say that.
Yeah, at least in a way. Like I kind of know what you're talking about, right? Like we talked a little bit off mic about how some of the side characters in this one end up being some of the most pivotal characters in the entire book, and that's entirely true, right? Like
well, and then just the whole thing with like Prince Charming being the 3 different Prince Charmings, they kind of allude to this, that like they're fairy tale characters, and the reason why they're fairy tale characters is that they do have something like innately magical about them. And like his is that like he rolls a 20 every time for charisma, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you see that when he's going out for his dinner that he never planned to pay for, right? Like he's definitely got moves.
But I would say like in that regard, like where we know that Jack is all these different Jacks and Bigby is at least 2 different types of wolves. I mean, there's so much back catalogs for who these characters are and what stories they came from. And that's what some of the encyclopedia does, is that it talks about like the different versions of these characters. Like you have the Baba Yaga comes into some of the storylines. You get all these different characters that you wouldn't necessarily see together. And then there's these little like, it's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like they connect and you're just like, whoa, how does this, what? no way. Like,
I mean, I understand it because I'm an anime fan, and there are numerous series where I have to say, okay, give this series 3 to 5 episodes, and then you'll get into it. I understand what you're saying, but I'm only 3 to 5 episodes into this, and I'm not quite sure if I'm willing to invest any more.
So, Suzanne, did the mystery work for you overall?
I think so, yeah. It also kind of worked for me at the moment because in my quarantine time, I started to binge watch Criminal Minds again.
Nice.
So that was fun. I was just like, oh wow, like Big B is totally doing like a Hotchner move right now and explaining like,
God, I'm gonna have to go look up
even
Criminal Minds for the show notes now.
Isn't that Mandy
Criminal Minds.
Patinkin?
Mandy Patinkin is Gideon, and he's only there for 2 seasons, and then
Oh,
he's
that's right.
replaced by another man.
I'm so mad that you made me. I'm gonna have to like put the words "Criminal Minds" into my search browser.
Oh,
You
Criminal
don't like Criminal
Minds,
Minds?
Matthew Gray Gubler,
It's not my fave.
Pageant
I've
Brewster.
never watched it, so.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it.
But Pat,
Well,
did
okay.
the mystery work for you?
I mean, in so much that, yes, it did. It was a mystery. It was too mundane for me, which is ironic. I understand. But
I mean, I think that is part of the point, right? Like, it's
yeah,
sort of part of the conceit of the book, but it doesn't really stick to that because it ends up being much more magical than it is in this volume. But
I mean,
again,
in future volumes, is that
yeah,
what you're saying?
we're only talking about this
Focus,
volume. I
Matthew.
was saying,
One
like,
thing,
you're correct about this volume in that it is very mundane, but I think it's supposed to be that way. Like, I think it's supposed to be.
Season 2 gets real good. I hear you. I hear you.
yeah, it's like The Office. You managed to get through the first 6 episodes of season 1. Don't worry, Michael Scott gets better.
Yeah. See, no, I get you. I'm on the same page.
I would say the one thing that I remember thinking the first time and then also thinking the second time is like, okay, they're fairy tale characters. They talk about how they have immortal youth
Right.
and like obviously they all have magical abilities, but they have the same like amount of blood as like normal people.
Yeah, like in the immortality thing is interesting. Does our world is obviously completely separate to their homeland, but so if a story is written in our world, do those characters just appear in the homeland, or have they always been there and somehow their stories seeped over to our world, kind of thing? Do they cover that later on?
I will tell you, I do not remember.
Okay.
I think it's more that their stories leak over, but that would be
I was
something
gonna
I'd
say, I
have to
think
like.
it is the other way around, actually, where like the stories are drawn from their world, not put into their world by us.
Okay.
I do know that there's a big separation before they have to leave. Like that they
Well, I did they. I don't know if it was the game or in this volume, but they said they come over around like, was it like the Revolutionary War or something like that?
I don't
They
think they
broke,
specify the time in this one, so it must have been the game. They do specify the time eventually, I think.
but it's
In the
like
yeah.
late 18th century kind of thing when they break over. From what I recall, I don't know where I got the information from.
I was gonna say, I'll let Suzanne take that one.
I
But it's
don't remember
earlier.
off the top of my head, but if I look at the Fables
Wiki.
wiki, maybe it'll tell me.
But yeah, so it's interesting because some of those, like obviously Narnia and Wizard of Oz, and like certain things are newer than other fables, which are much older, but they're all immortal, and they were all living in that in their world. Are they immortal, or are they only immortal in our world? And does the popularity of their story dictate anything for them? Like, if no one knew their story in our world, would they still be immortal?
I don't think
These
it has
questions are-
belief rules in the American God's way or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Well, and like so the reason why he doesn't like they say it's the Emerald City, but they don't say anything about Oz, and I really don't think that they talk about like no, Dorothy Gale does come up eventually. But
Well, they
like
got the flying
Aslan,
monkey.
yeah, but like Aslan doesn't come up. Like they don't actually say Aslan, they just say like the high.
Copyright.
Yeah, because
It's all public
all
domain
all of
stuff.
that's what they say, like it was that way. That they chose to pretty much take characters that were in the public domain to do it.
For sure.
But I don't think they really talk about like
Nitty gritty of how it works.
yeah,
Which is fine. It's
they
fantasy.
kind of wave the magic wand literally
Yeah.
over it like it's magic.
Mhm.
Um and I don't know because like there's characters that get born in this series.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, like whether they will be immortal.
Well, so like a big thing that happens in this is that like Pinocchio is upset because he wants to have sex and
Yeah,
he's
he's
been a
like,
little boy for
Oh my
thousands
god.
of years. So like Pinocchio has that thing, but the children who are born later, they grow at a faster rate, but they still are able to have children, and it's different from what happens in the fairy tales. So like Bluebeard would never have been with Rose Red in the fairy tales. Like they wouldn't have ever crossed over, but they cross over in this.
right.
And then there's characters who have other backgrounds that they talk about in this, but are never part of an actual version of the stories, if that
Mm.
makes sense too. So, yeah, it's they don't ever fully explain that part of it, but it's not something that you end up having eventually where you're like, "Oh, I wonder what happens with this." Because if I remember correctly too,
Mhm.
like this is one of the main ones that they really talk about the fact that they're like in New York. And then so many of the other ones, they don't really talk about where they are, or it happens in so many various locations
Sure.
that you forget that they're not in their own world.
Mhm. Okay.
Oh, intriguing questions that might draw you into the second volume, huh?
Perhaps. No, talking about like the Wizard of Oz and stuff, I enjoyed like Susie, you were pointing out some of the covers had a bunch of characters, and like when they're talking about the
Hmm.
adversary, they had a bunch of characters. But the scene with Snow White in her office that has all like the artifacts of all the different
Yeah.
stories. I enjoyed poking around there. Like there's a lamp from Aladdin just sitting there.
Yeah, and that's like one of only 2 double-page spreads in the book too, I think, actually. Like there's the one in
Yeah.
Snow White's office, and then there's the one where everyone's kind of joining together to leave the homelands that has like Robin Hood and Alice
Yeah.
and the Tin Man and swans and dragons.
Well, and then there's the whole thing about how they say that anything that happened before they left the homelands is like kind of forgiven.
Right.
So how many of these characters are like co-inhabiting? Like they have it's the witch from Hansel and Gretel that they talk to, essentially, like the witch who eats children.
Yeah.
Bigby talks to her at one point. You have Bluebeard here. You have the big bad wolf. So it's like, who else could we possibly see come up? Or is there someone who
Wasn't
we
Grimble
would?
the troll from the Three Belly Goats Gruff?
Yeah,
So like the security guard at the which we see in his true form when he's coming to help Bigby in the cell.
yeah. And I love that transformation scene of Bigby, like as he's getting more agitated, getting towards Bluebeard, like him morphing into his wolf self.
Mm. That just going back to that office scene, there's
Yeah.
that giant tree in the background, which I don't know what that is representative of, but there's a hanged person in the background. Is that just a reference to the Wizard of Oz film?
Where's the hanged person
I say
at?
I'm looking. Hang on.
You don't see like in the gap of the tree.
Oh, there is.
There's a hanged outline of a person.
I don't know.
I don't know. I was just trying to like. I was enjoying like, oh, that's Excalibur. That's Aladdin's lamp. Oh, and there's a hanged person in that tree. What?
Could that also just be like a reference to like a deadwood or something like that? Something to do with what the tree is
Quite
itself?
possibly. I don't know what the tree represents. So yeah.
Yeah, no. I
Yeah.
mean, they all look like they're kind of specific things, so I would be surprised if it's not a specific thing, but I cannot place it. Maybe we'll get a comment.
I mean, if the series is as popular as you guys say, I'm sure someone has gone through and like
It was really big, actually, like to the point where, like, I wish I had felt like more strongly about it. I guess, like that's kind of what I got through the first volume. I was like, I kind of like. I feel like it's me, not the book. Like the book is good. Like, and we haven't even really talked about the art. I think the art's actually really fantastic, and
Oh,
it's
it's
fantastic for the
beautiful.
book too.
Especially like the non like story-based art.
You talking about the cover pages?
Yes, that's supposed to be what I'm talking about.
Okay, so like the covers that were on like each of the individual issues.
Yeah,
The more
and
painted.
that same tree that is in her office.
Is it the tree of life? Is it literally the tree
Well,
of
so
knowledge from the Bible?
in this item here, like in this picture, you have the pig, you have Snow White with an apple, the monkey has an apple, you have Boy Blue and probably Jack on the picture in front of the tree. It's the same tree with
Yeah,
Big
and
B
like if
coming out.
trees and apples and women holding apples paints a picture that it's the tree of knowledge
Yeah.
of good and evil.
I mean, that's also
Which-
just Snow White and her apples, though, too.
And that monkey's got an apple though too.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Where'd that monkey get that apple
maybe
from?
the monkey's also a princess. I don't know. Maybe Prince Charming was married to that monkey once.
Oh my god, he gets around.
It could have happened. You never know.
Fables as you've never seen them before, Pat.
Oh my god. But no, so the mystery is Rose Red has gone missing. Her on again, off again boyfriend has run to Big B to get him to figure out what's happened. Her apartment is splattered in blood and things have been tossed about. What did you guys think about Big B's idea of recreating the crime scene on the floor above or below? I don't remember, but
So I'm looking at this room, right? And I'm looking at
Yeah.
how much blood is in this room. If
uh,
a person lost this much blood, they're dead. Like, I'm sorry, they just are.
well, like he's recreating it with literal blood. He's got blood packets that he's like, okay,
It's an
spray this around.
unusual
Yeah,
it's
why
an
not?
unusual thing.
It is. It's like, is that really the best way to figure out how much blood that she lost? I don't know.
mean, I
I don't know.
It makes sense until you squint at it, I think. Like, the first time I reread this, I was like, oh, okay, blah, blah, blah. And the second time, I was like, well, actually, though, like, look at that room. If he's really confident all that blood is hers, she's dead.
See, I squinted the first time, so
That's
I don't
fair.
know.
I just took it for what it was, and I didn't think too much about the blood part.
Where'd he get the blood from?
That's a good question, actually. And, like, how when he's doing that thing with the blood where he has a bunch of blood packets, does he not, like, I don't know when he figured out
Connect
the
the
blood
two?
packet thing, actually. Like, that's the thing in the mystery that doesn't quite make sense to me. It's like,
Well,
I don't-
that's the one bit the one bit he didn't know was the blood packet, and yet he somehow got his hands on blood packets.
Yeah, and he also says, like, aha, when he does the freezer thing initially, which makes me think, like, he knows what's going on in issue 1, but then he says that he doesn't know what's going on, but
But then was him saying he didn't know what's going on just to have a date with Snow White?
I mean, maybe, right? And, like, I think also he kind of explains that he may have known what was going on but couldn't be sure also, because
Sure.
anything could have happened in the meantime. Like, they could have had this plan and she still could have ended up dead.
Right.
Oh, I just found something really interesting. So, I was just trying to use the internet to see if there was any like internet sleuths that were like the hanging man and the tree on the page of blah, blah, blah. But I found an article with an interview with the creator from Vulture, and they're asking like when he was developing it, which like elements came first, and he had an idea of a community with so and so living among them, and we didn't have a clue, and then that's how he got to the fairy tales, and then when he got the pitch accepted by Vertigo, they had a lot of different story arcs planned to show off, to say like this is where we could think it was going, and it was actually the people at Vertigo that made him do or like asked him to do this one first. So they asked for this murder mystery of Rose Red to be done first to start off the series, because they didn't want it to be like, they were concerned that it was gonna, I guess, end up too cutesy, like with fairy tales coming out of the woods and prancing around with unicorns and
Oh,
butterfly
that's
wings.
interesting. That's not the
It's-
reason I thought that they would have had for that.
Well, you can tell they tried real hard to be edgy in this one.
Oh yeah.
So, like, she wanted gritty and urban, and murder mystery in New York seemed like the most gritty and urban of the 3 or 4 story arcs at the time. So, it could have been, like, if this had been done purely from his standpoint, it would be interesting to see how he wanted. And he wanted the new characters to be new and interesting, but he didn't highlight, like, specific themes. So, like, when they started this, they didn't have, like, a big... It wasn't like how J.K. Rowling put down her Harry Potter grids and had all this stuff.
Sure.
He knew, like, characters he wanted, and he had some story arcs.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that actually like makes a lot of sense because I was considering that question we sometimes consider of like what themes or through lines do you see in the story, and like this story is very heavily plot to me. Like there's not a lot of theme to it. Like it's very much a what you see is what there is kind of network drama sort of deal.
And there's a little bit more thematic elements that come up later. I feel like there's a lot of theme of destiny that comes up later.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like at least this volume, is a lot of just like, oh, look at that. Oh, I recognize that name. Oh, look at that thing. Like I'm panning through it, I noticed that Bluebeard has, I think, Captain Hook's hook on a table in front of a pirate ship painting.
I mean, I think that's part of the fun of it is like...
They say that Bluebeard, like, conned a bunch of people out of their treasures when they got over here.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, to get them over here. So
I think that's the picture of Dorian Gray in his entryway, but, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, anything that's anything. I like when you get to see inside King Cole's, like, apartment. He has, like, a bunch of pipes.
Yeah.
And then he has, like, tiger-striped pillows. And then, for unknown reasons, he has a string quartet sitting on chairs. And then he's eating cereal.
Yeah. So Bigby is investigating things, painting other apartments with blood that he got somehow.
Yeah, that's I think the bit of the mystery that doesn't hold up is that bit. Like I think other than that, it's actually pretty clever and plays pretty fair with you.
Yeah, and then it's him and Snow White going around questioning people who might be
involved.
Perpetrators, yeah. Starting with Bluebeard, of course, and we find out that...
No, they started with Jack.
You're right, that's right. Jack's the first one that gets tossed.
But he's like, I know Jack didn't do it, because why wouldn't he clean up after himself if he did it?
And then it's on to Bluebeard, who I didn't know about Bluebeard.
And Bluebeard was a real person, too. He wasn't just a fairy tale.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Or, like, the story of Bluebeard is, based off of a real person.
Yeah, so we find out that Bluebeard and Rose Red have a secret engagement, and they've been engaged for a while. So Bluebeard says he has no reason to kill her because he hasn't married her yet. I
see you did not like that cliffhanger, Patrick.
No, I did.
Okay. Because I actually did like that cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good twist about the secret marriage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how it worked. I mean, he was like, Bluebeard was essentially like the reverse of a Black Widow. Like, that's what he tried to do.
It's true, because he paid Rose Red a dowry.
Yeah. So, yeah, Bluebeard is influenced partly by the real-life story of Gilles de Rais, a 15th century pedophile and child murderer.
Cool.
You know, fairy tales like you do.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of, like, early fairy tales were bad. Like, good stuff did not happen. There was not a happily ever after.
No, most of Grimm's fairy tales is pretty grim. But yeah, so Bluebeard didn't do it, but he tosses him in jail because that dude liked killing women.
No, he didn't put Bluebeard in jail until after he tried to kill Jack.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead.
And that's why he was able to put Bluebeard in jail. He's like...
Because Bluebeard's like, you know what? I'm killing Jack.
Because Jack killed Rose Red, his wonderful wife.
His wife-to-be.
No, I mean, I think actually, so the more we talk about it, I think in addition to kind of being an interesting plot in and of itself, the murder mystery also gives Bigby like license to introduce us to so many like different little corners of the world. And I think Even Pat, you were like, the most interesting thing about this is like the side bits, right? Like it's not the mystery, it's the stuff that's going around in the corners of the mystery and like the stuff we kind of touch on.
It gives him a reason to move through this world.
Yeah, and talk to a bunch of different people, right? And see like what their situations are and how they are different than you might expect and all that sort of thing. And then that kind of culminates in the party at the end where we get to see even a few more people. Like we get to see lovely old Pinocchio, and we get to hear King Cole's story about like why they actually like we don't get the story of why they left until issue 4, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that's just a little tip of the iceberg too.
No, I know who the adversary is. You guys
Oh,
wanna
yeah?
know?
Yeah, all right, let's do it. I think now's the time.
Okay, who do you think it is, Patrick?
Satan.
This isn't a Final Fantasy, Pat.
Blew it wide open. No, it makes sense. It's all there. Plus, we just pointed out that they got the tree of knowledge of good and evil in their office.
See, I'm not sure that's true. It's just a tree with the apples on it.
I would think that there's a fairy tale that has some sort of tree in it. Let's see.
No, trees
Fairy?
aren't in any fairy tales.
No, none. There are no trees. Definitely not dozens of them in forests either.
The juniper tree.
Nope, never happened.
The juniper tree is a German fairy tale published in Low German by the Brothers Grimm. It was believed until the early 1870s that the Brothers Grimm readapted various oral accountings and fables heard from public.
No, it's Satan. Adversary is
Okay.
Satan.
Why do you
The
think
juniper.
it's Satan, Pat?
Okay, you guys.
Well,
You
it's
guys-
Satan because they show you pictures of him, and he's Satan.
It's the juniper tree.
The tree is the
This-
adversary.
The story contains themes of child abuse, murder, cannibalism, and biblical symbolism. So it's the juniper tree that we see. That's why there's a hanging person from it.
And biblical symbolism vis-a-vis Satan.
Sure, Pat.
Done and done.
Let me go ahead and spoil this for the listeners. It's not
It's the
Satan.
Satan. No, don't let
It's not Satan. Satan is not a storybook character.
the cloven hooved like satyr version of Satan, which I've never really understood, but that's what it is.
That's just
Right
a
there.
random. That's just a random picture, Pat.
Oh, a picture talking about who the adversary is in a book about the adversary.
There's
Yeah.
a guy stalking a guy that looks just like him.
Done. Done.
Oh, whoa. So the juniper tree is used a lot of times to show the theme of guardianship or like a guardian spirit, and it's shown throughout Grimm fairy tales such as Cinderella, Briar Rose, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And like for Briar Rose, it's like the hedge that's there. This is what it's saying. Whoa, this is crazy. Juniper tree.
Suzanne's
Never knew
gone
about
now,
it.
Pat.
It's gone.
She's in the juniper tree.
The juniper tree apparently also grants reincarnation.
Well, they're immortal. They don't need to worry about that. So, anyways, Bluebeard tries to kill Jack. Bigby stops him by turning into a wolf.
I don't think we have
What's
to do
next?
the whole plot, Pat. I don't
Okay,
know if we
fine.
have to do it. I feel like we've talked around it enough that we should just get down to it. Like, would you / are you gonna read volume 2?
I mean, I think I've conveyed my thoughts. No, probably. Like, just this? No. Having heard about what's next through your guys' like hints and like playing the game that I played before, yes, I would read more.
Okay, so now I want to take you, Suzanne, because you said you read the 1st
Mhm.
volume and you feel like you're inspired to reread the whole series. So, like, what gives you that feeling having reread the first volume?
I want to go back through and like the same thing I had with some of the auxiliary characters on here that like we get to see or like we get little hints of them. Like I just want to go back through that progression of their story. Like especially like the big guy, you know, the hero, the actual hero of the Fable Town. Like I want to go back through and see how much like there was hidden about his true self.
Well, there isn't anything in this one.
Because I remember that when that hit and when that dropped and then like the death of someone too, it's like, oh my God, like I wonder if it would be the same for me. So, Pat, what if I told you that Volume 2 has a 4.8 out of 5 stars with 81% 5-star rating?
I remember liking Volume 2. And I remember liking stuff at least up through the main bit where they end up kind of confronting the adversary. Spoiler. Minor
Yeah.
spoiler. But like, I think there's also a pretty big consensus that the series kind of starts to drop off after that. I don't know if you agree, Suzanne. I felt it when I was reading it the first time.
The one that really sticks out to me is The Good Prince as being like the ultimate high for me, which would be issues 60 to 69.
Okay.
And then I do remember later on when, like, even though it's like this stuff is cool with like Bigby and who he really is and everything that happens with his storylines, like I remember getting to that point, and especially when they get to Toyland, being like,
spoiler.
Okay, like, can we get on with this kind of thing? So, yeah.
So it does kind of fall off.
I think that there is. So the Toyland happens in 18.
I think it's the same for any long-running series that seems to drag.
Yeah, but I think part of the reason people sort of have the opinion they do about this is that there's a very clear narrative push, especially as things approach like the midpoint to one specific thing that's going to happen, and then that thing happens, and then the series goes for another 75 issues. But I would say, like, even having had this discussion, and especially like feeling your enthusiasm for it, Suzanne, I'm a little bit higher on it than I was after having just read it myself, because you brought up a lot of things that I didn't remember when I was rereading Volume 1. And like it gets better after Volume 1. Like if you liked this volume, I would definitely keep reading it at least through like halfway through the series. If someone read this, they've read all of it that's actually good, and they want something else to read, what would you recommend to them?
Well, I mean, if they've read all of the Fables, go to Fairest. I would say Fairest is probably one of the better spin-offs. If you like gritty stuff, if you like how this is trying to be gritty, but you want like actual gritty done well, and like well-known characters get turned on their side and kind of changed. Simon and I were recently talking about this. Green Lantern, Blackest Day. What is it? Oh,
Blackest Night.
Yes, I liked that a lot. In Injustice, if you like to see characters turned on their edge.
Ooh, Injustice, I feel like, is actually a really good one for this, because it's established characters and then it's kind of turned a bit, which was kind of what I was trying to think about when I was thinking about recommendations too. I like that. All right, Pat, what would you recommend to someone who liked this book?
Play The Wolf Among Us.
All right.
Yeah.
The second one's going to come out. It's not by Telltale. Well, it is, but it's not made by the same people. Hopefully,
I thought they shelved that when they got defunded.
Telltale,
they were
whatever.
purchased by a new company.
I'll say Telltale doesn't exist anymore, right?
Telltale exists.
Um,
It's not actually Telltale though. Someone like, you'll like this, Susie. Someone like scraped out the innards and crawled into the skin that is Telltale, and now they're moving it out.
Oh, you mean like what happens when Luke's stranded out on that frozen planet, and to survive,
It's like the
he has to
Tauntaun.
go
Yes,
into the
the
skin?
Tauntaun is Telltale Games, and I'm hoping
Fun story.
I'm hoping they have enough of whatever like sinews of the writing team that made The Wolf Among Us 1, because it's really good, to make Wolf Among Us 2. But yeah, play the first one. What about you, Matthew? What would you recommend?
I want you to do another take on that.
No.
It felt really obvious.
No, how is it obvious?
So Matt, what would you suggest if you
See, Suzanne's
really
got
liked
it. She's
it?
only on this like
Exactly
once every
what I
year.
said.
It was the tone, Pat. So actually really similar to Suzanne's Injustice recommendation, which I kind of wish I had thought of, because that seems like a really good one, actually. There's a similar series, and it's just a mini-series. The Injustice comics go for a long time, so if you want something maybe that's a little bit more self-contained, this series is called The Life and Times of Savior 28, and it has like a Superman Captain America analog, but he sort of like starts facing off against problems as they would exist in the quote-unquote real world, but not in a way that sucks. Like in a way that actually makes sense and like stays within the bounds of its own rules and all that. Like it's not always a really big downer, I guess. Like, it definitely is a quote unquote serious look at superheroes, but in a way that actually is entertaining. So I think I would actually walk you from this over to Why the Last Man, which is a Brian K. Vaughan series, if you like this, because the art is actually very similar, and I think it also kind of does the thing of like, here's a high concept, and then we're going to start messing in this world, and also it has really good cliffhangers. Like, it pulls you through the story. I know, Pat, you've read at least part of that, right? Would you say that that's a good recommendation? Have you still only read like randomly volume 4 or whatever?
I haven't read those volumes that I read the first volume and stopped. But the one volume that I read was interesting.
If you like the shirtless people, Riverdale. That's why I understand now. Archie Andrews solves everything by taking his shirt off. So that's why Bigby got in the pool. That's the only way he could solve things, by taking his clothing off.
He's essentially like a wet dog at that point, right?
What do you think he smelled like?
A wet dog.
But like, do you think he smelled like a wet dog and man BO?
Anyway, Susie, it was great that you joined us this time.
I think that's going to do it for this
Where
one.
would people find you if you would like to be found online?
I'm probably more active on my Instagram for pictures of kayaking and cats, and sometimes cookies. But my Instagram's Suzanne_Payne, Payne, 2019.
All right. Well, thank you, Suzanne, for coming on to chat with us. It was a pleasure.
I hope I was entertaining.
Oh, definitely.
Always, Susie.
So if you want to get in touch with Pat or myself, you can find us on Twitter as @thehypnotoad and @MattLedge, respectively. You can also email us at waitingonthetrade@gmail.com and read more comics-related goodness at mattreadscomics.com. Until next time, stay safe, have fun, and keep reading comics.
And eat cheese.
And eat cheese.
What the...